Carey Gillam, who has been with Reuters for 17 years, has been maybe the most prolific writer on the topic of toxic poisons in our food. And I have Carey joining me today. Carey, thank you. Let me scoot a little bit closer to you. Is it okay? Are the cameras okay if I go? All right. So you wrote a book, Whitewash.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one of the questions, now we've just seen a lawsuit. Monsanto, I mean, that's gigantic. Huge verdict against glyphosate.
Right.
But you've been talking about this before there was, before there was lawsuits. Right. What has been your perspective? Have you been on Monsanto, or are you more focused on FDA? Who's really the bad guy in this?
So I've been following these issues since 1998. Since Reuters assigned me to start covering food and agriculture. Big business of GMO seeds and the pesticides used with them, glyphosate and Roundup. So yeah, I mean, I've been tracking this and tracking the research and tracking the data that plays into human health impacts and environmental impacts, for 20 some years. And as you talk about, the FDA and the USDA are agencies that I've spent a lot of time, asking a lot of questions there about their residue testing. And one thing they're supposed to do is look at our food every year, test thousands of food samples, to look at pesticide residues and to understand what levels we're finding. And what I found so frustrating over the years was that while they would test for hundreds of different insecticides and fungicides and herbicides, they never would test for glyphosate.
That is so weird. What was it about that one?
And it's the most widely used agrochemical in the world, the most widely used herbicide in history. It's used on dozens and dozens of different food crops in conjunction with the production of everything from corn and soybeans to almonds and spinach and grapes. It's pervasive in agriculture. So the fact that they were refusing to look for pesticide residues, glyphosate residues in our foods, really frustrated me. And I started tracking the FDA and USDA through Freedom of Information requests. And this is how I found out, that they actually did start a program, the FDA did in 2016, to start doing some limited testing. They were under great criticism from the Government Accountability Office for not doing this testing.
Right.
And they started doing some testing, and what they were finding wasn't, very appetizing. They had a chemist, a very senior guy, who was finding a lot of this in oatmeal, baby products, baby foods that you would feed, young kids.
Developing brains, developing
right,
immune
and
systems.
He found it in honey at very high illegal levels in honey, and boom, program gets suspended. He gets pulled from any further pesticide glyphosate testing, and so that's where this story came from.
Wow, I mean, it's it's interesting. You can follow any one of these stories. And I talk about that. We have a lot of people on the show that cover the gamut of, I guess, what would be considered conspiracy theories.
Right.
But you sort of see the same program every time. It's no matter, you just switch out the product, but the industries and the way they're able to manipulate and the way our government agencies are going along with it. Now, one of the things I know as a journalist, and I've heard about this, is it actually true that you will go to, say, Monsanto or Dow, and they kind of take journalists through, here's how we'd like to teach you to write about us? Did you go through programs like that?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Just tell me a little bit about that, because I mean, as a journalist, I'm curious what that's like.
Well, so Monsanto did it probably more so than Dow and DuPont, but they all sort of do the same thing. They really want you to understand the narrative from their perspective. And the hope is that you will present the facts and the narrative and the evolving story through their lens and through, the facts as they are most beneficial to those corporations. So Monsanto, I was in their offices many times and got to see the cool corn chipper and go through the labs and go to their demonstration plots and meet with their, scientists and marketing executives and their chairman, so they really do try to woo reporters and groom them. But if you do it for as long as I've done it and you do all of your reporting, you start to see that the message that they're giving you doesn't always match up with the data and what farmers are saying and scientists are saying and what the research is showing. And that's very clearly what happened with glyphosate and Roundup. And that's sort of the nature of my book, is I walk you through the whitewashing of this chemical and this herbicide, because of course we've heard Roundup, glyphosate is so very safe enough to drink, safer than table salt,
Right.
safe enough to be sprayed directly on oats before they're harvested so that their pesticide winds up in baby oatmeal. We've heard that for
Right.
years, and it's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, clearly now with these lawsuits coming through, so is there an incentive for journalists to write beneficial treatments of these companies?
Well, there certainly is. You gain access. I mean, if you're writing friendly stories, you are going to have more access. And if you're working for someone like Reuters or Bloomberg or Dow Jones, very highly competitive, by the minute sort of news agencies, access is really important. And you need that CEO to like you, and you need the company to talk to you and to give you heads up. So, it's a hard job because you do need access, but you also need to be fair. And I think Reuters and Bloomberg, they try very hard to do that. But if you're a young journalist and you're trying to get those brownie points with your boss and you want an exclusive, it makes sense
Sure.
to
I
be
mean,
friends
you're
with the
going to lose
company.
the gig to Johnny. He's got an interview with Donna Farmer over at Monsanto that Carey couldn't get because she wasn't nice enough.
Yeah.
That's sort of what ends up happening. It's
That's
just the food
definitely.
chain. You rise because you have access, and it's something that people don't really understand. It's not even just monetary. It's just your career and your business,
Yeah.
thrives and improves by just treating large billion-trillion-dollar companies very well.
It does, but of course you are also, you get brownie points if you break deep investigative pieces as well, and so it's a balancing act. But you do see reporters that spend a lot of time, sucking up to these big corporations so they get big scoops, and it doesn't serve anybody well.
Have you ever been nervous? I mean, I get this a lot. Do you ever get nervous reporting against a company as powerful as Monsanto, Dow? I mean, these are institutions that have been around for a very long time, been involved in various nefarious activities,
Right.
it seems. Do you ever get nervous as a reporter reporting these stories?
I think I've had, once early on in my career, I had the FBI warn me to look under my car, be sure, because I was reporting on an organized crime story. And there's a woman, in the Pacific Northwest who's was pushing on these issues, and her house burned down with her 4 children in it, mysteriously. So.
Right.
There are reasons to be concerned, but I think as a journalist, you're not. The more people push back on you and the more they tell you to be quiet, the more driven you are. So I don't really feel fear, and I hope that's not ill-advised.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think you can't do your job if you think about
Yeah.
that. And we are wired for that. We're wired to get the story.
Right. Exactly.
I guess it's like being a soldier of sorts. You rush into danger to get the, come out with the prize, which is the real story. So tell me, let's get into a little bit. I mean, is glyphosate our only issue? Is this the only, you said all the other chemicals are being looked at except glyphosate.
Right.
Does that mean that there's no other chemicals we have to worry about? Do you think glyphosate's the worst? Like, why glyphosate? Why is this the story right now?
So in my book, I talk about that glyphosate to me represents sort of the poster child, if you will. Monsanto and glyphosate is a poster child for a much bigger problem that we have with pervasive pesticide use. We have been convinced that we need to have a pesticide-dependent food production system. And this benefits a handful of very powerful corporations who are selling, these chemicals that we're just drenching our farm fields with. It's not beneficial to human health, and it's certainly not sustainable by any means. The science shows us this is not a long-term solution. Glyphosate is also remarkable because it is so widely used. It represents about 25% of the herbicide market, most widely used in history. 123 million pounds in the 1990s, up to 1.8 billion pounds used now. It's in our drinking water.
All together or per year?
Global. This is
Global.
per year.
Wow.
This is per year. 123 million pounds a year to 1.8 billion pounds a year.
Wow.
And this is even found in rainwater, according to our U.S. Geological Survey, which is part of the Department of Interior. So it's in our food, it's in our bodies. And we're told by the companies and the regulators that they work very closely with that we shouldn't worry about this, but our independent scientists are telling us we need to worry about this, and we need to be engaged and informed. And every consumer out there, you're feeding these pesticides to your children every morning. A bowl of strawberries, according to our government data, typically can have residues of 20 different pesticides on it, including chlorpyrifos, which is our fourth most prevalent pesticide found on food, according to the FDA, which has been shown to be very demonstrably neurodevelopmentally damaging to children. It's been banned from household use. It's supposed to be banned from agricultural use, but Dow Chemical has argued to keep it on the market. The Trump administration has agreed with Dow Chemical. Federal courts have told the Trump administration, no, you need to go ahead and move it. It's a dangerous pesticide that's damaging our children's brains, and it's in your fruits and vegetables that you probably have for breakfast this morning.
I mean, and then you just think of just the collection of it. Even if like someone says, well, it's just trace amounts. But this is food. This is literally 3 meals a day.
Right.
I mean, a trace amount only remains trace if you only came in contact with it once. I mean, we're talking about over, like every. And as you're saying, so they back off on, on studying it in food. Why do you think? What was the motivation? I mean, this is something that I deal with all the time. People
Right.
what is the motivation? I have friends that are lawyers. Like, I need to have a motive, or I just can't buy into a story. What is the motive for a government agency to not investigate a chemical that is now losing in court systems hundreds of millions of dollars, probably go billions, trillions? Who knows where these cases are going to go? Now we know there's a problem. We knew there was a problem. I mean, there are
Right.
so many studies out there now showing that this stuff. I mean, World Health. I mean, as simple as this: World Health Organization, who is also questionable at times, but it came forward and said
Right.
probably carcinogenic to humans, the second highest cancer rating there is. Why would a government agency not inspect our food supply?
So they will tell you, and this is USDA and FDA. USDA is still not testing. FDA is doing this limited program now. They have resumed, according to FDA. They will tell you it's a matter of money, it's a lack of proper equipment, it's a lot of bureaucratic sort of problems and allocation of resources. That's what they will tell you. What you see in the documents is evidence of that, but also evidence that whenever they do find a problem, they back away from it. They scurry away as quickly as they can. We have FDA documents in which a chemist is reporting finding these illegal levels and asking, what are we going to do about it? And I think we're going to see a lot of this, to come, a lot of illegally high levels of glyphosate. And you see the agency saying, you know what, we're not going to worry about that. Those aren't official samples. We don't need to report that. Illegal samples in corn.
When you say, so this illegally, what is the legal threshold for glyphosate?
And this is a whole nother messy sort of matter. So the EPA sets MRLs, maximum residue levels,
Okay.
and those are the legal limits. And they're different for every pesticide in every food. So for glyphosate, it's going to be different. A legal level in an apple is going to be different than a legal level in, a wheat cracker, for instance, or something like that.
There must be some sort of like a courtroom where you go and fight to, well, for an apple, can we just get a sidebar deal with the government?
Right. I mean, these
So
MRLs
arbitrary.
are suggested by the companies that sell the chemicals. That's how it works.
Oh, okay.
They suggest the levels to the EPA that they want to see. And what we've seen with glyphosate is that these legal levels have been raised over the years so that more and more and more of glyphosate is allowed to be considered legal in the food. But even when you find illegal levels, again, they don't want to report it. They don't want to consider it to be official. So, I'm fighting this. I'm suing the FDA and the EPA to get more data that they don't want to turn over right
Sounds
now.
familiar. Good for you.
But what we have seen, what they have turned over so far, is alarming, because it looks like they're certainly not planning on being transparent with the public about their data. And they're dodging tricky questions, even while internally they're discussing how much higher they're expecting to see these residues of herbicides, glyphosate and 2,4-D and dicamba in our food. And at the same time that we have scientists both in our government and outside of our government saying, we can't even rely on what's legal or not legal. These MRLs do not protect the public. There's a whole line of research and science that says these trace amounts over and over, an synergistic effect with all of these other, pesticides that we're taking in, are contributing to disease and human health ailment. And we're way behind. Our regulatory apparatus is way behind the science in protecting public health.
See, I have a theory, and I think it's something that we don't really think about. We don't think about. It's easy to just say, just down with glyphosate. We got to get glyphosate out of all of our food. I look at when I watched the FDA decide to not test it, I thought, there's an element to this that I understand actually, and the problem is, it seems to me, is that these regulatory agencies and our government, technically, it really has two jobs. As one is to protect the health of the people, but it's also to keep commerce alive in America. And this issue seems to me to have really diabolical effects. It's going to be catastrophic for farmers. I mean, you know, farmers, I think, are hanging in the balance here. What did they know? They were told these chemicals are safe. They were told to use them. You know, we've seen the lawsuits by Monsanto against people trying to use organic seeds and all of those issues.
Right.
The farmers are caught in this. They've been using this product. But now what happens if suddenly you start testing food and finding out that everything's at an illegal level, or that any trace amount of glyphosate, now scientific studies are showing it's going to add up and be really bad for your health, as we're seeing. Our health outcomes in our kids, neurological disorders, autoimmune disorders, gut health. I mean, you have to think glyphosate's contributing to all the issues. Children now with, you know, with intestinal problems. If our government did its job, what happens to agriculture in America, and what happens to our food? All of the General Mills, Nabisco, all of the, I mean, these are billion-dollar companies. We make money exporting foods to the rest of the world. If we admit our food is contaminated, we destroy our entire food market.
Picture.
Do we not? Am I wrong though? Am I overstating it?
Dark picture. No, I don't think you are. And I think it is that cumulative information that is so threatening to the giant chemical companies like Monsanto, because it's not just the residues in the foods. It's what we're doing to biodiversity, to soil health. It's what we're doing to human health with the cancer
Flows
cases.
Into rivers it's
animal
health
right.
And
so it's all of this cumulative information. When you put it all together, yes, it's a very damning picture. But we don't get that cumulative information on a regular basis. We get bits and pieces, and we get the propaganda, and we get the pushback. So, I mean, in Whitewash, I try to put it all together, but you don't really see that. And the good news, I guess, is that the food companies are seeing it, and they are aware of it. I've met with several who are very worried that consumers are going to get it and that they are going to see that whole message. And the more we hear about pesticides in our foods and how that is, you know, hurting human health, they're trying to work with farmers, and they're trying to work with grain handlers and say, we need to start growing food with fewer pesticides in a more sustainable way, because consumers are going to demand it. You know, they already are to a certain extent.
I mean, you look at them,
and right.
The market, like I think about, you know, you find organic food in Walmart now, organic in Target. I mean, to me, that's some of what, you know, the brilliance and the genius of people like you. The fact that you've been doing this work and getting it out there. Now there's lawsuits coming around. I mean, it doesn't, you know, I did put it, you know, paint it in a dark picture. But that's how our government, I think, looks at it. Like, it's just going to be catastrophic. So we got to hide everything. We got to hide everything from the people. And I think that what it seems is important for us to let people know is your government, actually, your health is not the number one priority. The health of our economy is the number one priority. And if you don't take responsibility to start doing your own investigations and read and look into these things, you may find yourself in a really shocking, terrifying position with a very sick kid.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the most outrageous sort of things that's been going on recently is the head of our National Toxicology Program, one of the most esteemed scientists in the world, a woman named Linda Birnbaum. She and other scientists just in the last year came out with a series of papers that sort of tried to raise that red flag and say exactly this, that our science is telling us that we're endangering public health. We're not protecting public health when it comes to these chemicals and other environmental contaminants. And we need our regulators to step up. We need better public policy. And the response to that has been lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, coming after her and basically trying to shut her down, get her investigated, subpoenaing her emails. They want her to be quiet. And why? They say it's not her job to talk about public policy. It's not her job to talk about how to better protect.
It's not her job to do her job to protect. I mean, I just, it's just amazing, and the way we attack I mean, it's constant. We attack doctors that step out, scientists that step out. I mean, that system's allowed, and it just shows you the danger of the power of these lobbies and the money that's in our government and these agencies. I don't think by nature you shut someone up that works with you or for you unless you got someone tapping on the shoulder saying, by the way, you want your funding next year, you better stop that person and shut them down.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on for days. Everyone should definitely read Whitewash. Your work has been incredible. What would you, if there's one thing you want to leave people with in our audience, what is it that they need to be thinking about as they move forward with their children and their families and dealing with our food supply?
I mean, I think education and information is the very first step. I'm outraged that 1 in every 2 men now is expected to get cancer in their lifetime, 1 in every 3 women. Pediatric cancers, certain types of cancers are on the rise in children. And we're told to live with it. We're told to take a pill, to cut off a body part. We see ads all the time of new drugs and no. I mean, what we need to do is we need to prevent cancer and prevent disease, and we need to have a healthier future, a healthier environment and food system for our kids. And the regulators and the lawmakers aren't going to make that happen. It's consumers, so you need to vote with your pocketbook, and you need to vote on these policies and make food policy, just as important as foreign policy, right? I mean, this is our future.
Oh, so much. It's such an honor to have you. Thank you for joining me, Carey. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
We're going to be watching. If anything breaks, anything happens, let us know. We'll get you right back on.
Great. All right.